Last Sunday, was anybody here? I was kind of mean because after that Sunday, I called everybody that not everybody, but I called a lot of people that I knew weren't here, and I was like, you missed it. Oh, you missed it. I love doing that. It's just mean, but it's fun. Last week was an interesting Sunday. And I've kind of been just processing it this week and kind of trying to think through it. And if you weren't here, I'll let you know what happened. We worshiped Jesus for the whole time. And we do that, and Chester didn't get to preach, and that's happened before. But last week was different. And I was going, God, what was different about last week? And there were a couple of things that stuck out in my mind. One is we did some ministry stuff, like we prayed for some people, and there was some personal ministry, but 99.9% of that service was totally about God. I mean, it really was. It was just adoring Him. It was just going after Him. It was just loving Him. And you're like, well, we do that every Sunday. There was something different. And it was interesting because the music came from the stage, but the worship came from the people. You know what I mean? Like literally most of the service, they didn't have a band up here. And it still was just this roar rising up. And at kind of in the beginning of it, towards the beginning of it, a little bit into it, Chester looked at me and I knew exactly what he was thinking. And I said to him after that service, I said, I hear sounds that I heard in revival. I heard the whispers of a roar that comes out of people and a hunger of something that just rises up and says, we're going to just glorify God. It was a cool time. It was probably one of my favorite services we've had in a long time, just because, it felt so pure. Does that make sense? And it was funny because, Chester said we were talking about it Monday morning, and he said to me, he's like, and we really didn't do anything. And I'm like, yeah, not a lot accomplished. But the reality is when you worship is the end game. See, if I love my wife with the full thought of, I'm just going to adore you because you're going to make me dinner, I've missed the point. Now, she's going to make me dinner because I show love. There's going to become benefits. But when we begin to understand that worship is the goal, that if people adoring God, you're going, well, like, what was the point of that? That was the point. Well, that didn't make a lot of sense. Well, heaven's going to get real boring for you. Because we were designed and created to worship. That's what you were made to do. And not just in a church setting. You're designed to bring glory to Him in everything you do. You are a worshiper 24/7. Does that make sense? Okay, so now there's some sermons I preach that God just gives me something that has nothing to do with me, like not really dealing with it, but this sermon is not one of those. This sermon is God dealt with me, and since I'm a preacher, I assume He wants to deal with you too, because He wouldn't just deal with me, right? So I'm going to confess and get a little human today, and that's all right. But at the beginning of that service, like we came in for prayer that morning, I wasn't super into it, wasn't really feeling it. Had a kid at home, not feeling good. Tiffany had to stay home with the kid, and she was bummed out. And so it was just kind of one of those mornings. You ever had one of those? I don't know, maybe you come to church every time just pumped up and ready to go, but some days I don't really feel like that, right? So I show up, and then we go back, and we're praying, doing the things, and we come out here, and I felt absolutely nothing at the beginning of that service. I mean, just like, I'm hungry. Please, dear Lord, let Him preach 30 minutes. If you love us at all. Like, I just wasn't there. There was absolutely nothing spiritual in my body. I'm thinking about other things. I'm not thinking about worshiping. Oh, y'all are super saints. That's great for you. But some people are going to be real in here. Y'all just be spiritual. That's cool. That's great. Everybody's looking at you. You're cool. But me, I wasn't feeling it. And the Lord said something to me that morning, and He just kind of gave me a little whooping. Is that the southern slang, a little whooping? And He said this to me. He said, Matt, He said, you don't worship based on you. You worship based on me. And so I had to make a decision at that point. I had to choose at that point if I was going to worship my feelings or lack of feelings, or if I was going to worship a God who was worthy of it. See, but that'll set you free when you begin to understand it's not about you when it comes to worship. Because you can't come in and be like, man, it was just a rough week, and I didn't pray enough this week, and I didn't sing enough, and I don't even know where my Bible's at. We don't worship based on my week. We worship based on who He is. And He is worthy of worship regardless of your situation. He's awesome. He's good and perfect. So let me tell you what happened. So I'm standing over here. Camera people are hating me right now because it's dark over here and they can't see me, if that's all right. God bless them. I'm standing over here and God gave me a little right? And I'm like, okay. And I said, I'm going to worship God. And I'd like to tell you that like just this feeling came into me of just that, and it wasn't that way. I put my hands in the air and I begin to declare His praises, and you're like, are you faking it? And I'm like, no, you can't fake what's already true. He's worthy of worship, so I couldn't fake that He's good. So I began to put my hands in the air and I began to go, God, you are good. And it was a struggle. It was like walking through quicksand, to be honest. Like, God, you are so good to us. You are so perfect. You are so great. And I just began to, but as I continued to worship Him, something happened. As I began to step, like my feet started getting like I was coming out of that quicksand, and it got easier and easier to walk. Like going through deep mud, and then you start coming out of the mud, and the mud starts falling off your shoes. And pretty soon, it was just like whoosh. Like God just brought me and just took me along into this thing, and the rest of the service was just like, right? But I had to make a choice. I had to choose to worship. See, we sometimes get an idea in Christianity that we're just going to like, you're just going to feel it. You're just going to feel it, and you're just going to go with it. But if you don't feel it, you ain't going with it. But the reality is we don't do anything based on our emotion. We do everything based on His word. When He said, listen to this, when He said you're going to worship, He said, he's at the lady at the well, and she's like, do we worship at the mountain? Do we worship at the temple? He goes, that's not the point. He says, you're going to worship in spirit and in truth. What that means is you're going to worship from the revelation truth you have of who He is. If you don't have revelation truth of who He is, it's real hard to worship. And second of all, you're going to worship the Spirit, because once I made that decision, the Spirit came behind me and gave me a boost. The Spirit took me into that place. But it started with my decision. Does that make sense? I choose to worship Him based on Him. But why does it matter? Why does it matter if I come in on a Sunday morning and I just want to get Chester done so I can get to the Chinese restaurant? Right? Why does it matter? Why? Worship is such a sacred thing. And I've really been God's talking to me how about we're kind of losing a little bit of that. And what do I mean by that? It's not the building. I'm not saying like we need more respect for the building, because last Wednesday night we were down at the courthouse, and that place was the most sacred holy space in town for an hour. I mean, it was, if you missed it, oh my God, it was phenomenal in that place. And Wednesday night at 7 p.m. or 6:30 p.m., that place was the sanctuary of God even more than this. This was just a building. That place was the place. Why? Not because of the building, but because of the presence of God, because there was a people who worshiped Him. He was enthroned upon our praises. It's like He just came into that place and He sat down. It was mind-blowing. I went back I had the key. I felt really powerful. Oh, wait, they gave me the key to the courthouse. I felt like super. It was like the key to the city. It's the closest I'll probably ever get to getting one of those, right? I was so tempted, like some night at like 2 a.m, sneak out there and just walk in because I had the key. But I went back the next day on Thursday to give them back their key. So sad. And I walk in there, and it was so surreal because they're just doing business. Like there's just people going and there's court cases happening and there's people scattering and the security guard. I mean, just all this stuff's happening. And I'm like, man, like 15 hours ago, this was like the throne room of God. This place was just echoing with a group of people singing, holy, holy, holy. And then it was just like this craziness happening. It was such a weird, I literally like stopped. I walked in and I just stopped and I'm like, whoa. Why does it matter? It isn't the building. It isn't even particularly just about a Sunday morning time, but there's something about a family worshiping together. There's something about me standing shoulder to shoulder with you and raising our hands to adore our Father. There is something special about that. Can you worship at home? I was thinking the other day, when it comes to church activities, I love our worship team, but there's better worship teams you can put up on YouTube. Right? And there are a lot better preachers you can put up than me and Chester. You can get all the elements of church on the internet. But there's something you can't get from the internet. And that's brothers and sisters, family, going after him together. There's something you can't get alone in your house. It's true. So I began to think about it. I like numbers. So I began to think about the numbers. Let's just say you come on Sunday mornings. That's 2 hours a week. And you figure 2 hours a week, and you take a couple of weeks vacation, so 50 weeks, that's 100 hours. That's a little over 4 days of your year we're going to spend together worshiping. 4 days, a little over 4 days of 300. Now, let's say you're super spiritual. You come Wednesday nights. You come Sunday mornings. You come Wednesday prayer. I'll even give you that you're spending 8 days, double that. You're spending 8 days. That's just not much time together. But it's so valuable. Is this a sermon about coming to church? No, it goes deeper in that. But I want you to grasp something. I was listening to this pastor at this church, and I'm naming the church or name the pastor, but it's a larger church, and he said something about their worship. He said, worship is a sacred thing for us. He said, it's so sacred that here's what they do. This is going to blow your mind, right? Okay, we're not doing this. Don't freak out. But when the music starts, when worship starts at 10:30 or whatever, they shut those sanctuary doors. And if you're not in here, you can't come in. And the reason they do that is because it's such a sacred time for them. They don't want people coming in and out to be a distraction to what that person, what that family is enjoying in the presence of God. Now, my first thing was, that is the dumbest thing ever. How do you grow a church with a theory like that? And he explained it, and I thought, man, this is amazing. He says, people that, you're going to be late. It happens. Life happens, right? I've been late a lot of times, right? It's going to happen. But he said the people, when they come, there's such a culture in their church of the importance of worship that they don't want to come in because they want to see the people in that church not deal with distraction. They want them to experience the presence of God and worship God without any distraction. So they have a heart to do that. And so, it's not the whole service. Like when, they switch to preaching or the offering or whatever, they open doors, let people come in. But I thought, isn't that phenomenal? Just that idea of how sacred these moments are. How valuable these times are that we have together. Where we can worship Him. Where we can experience what we experienced last week. Where we can experience what we experienced this morning. There are really such few moments. Now, I don't think we're going to start shutting doors. Don't freak out. You're like, we got to get here early. They're going to lock us out. Not doing that. But to get the idea of like what is happening when you're digging into that place of worship. And I started to think about that time that we spend together, those hours. And here's the thing. Here's the point of this. It's not about missing church. People miss church. That's cool. We've always been like, go take a vacation. You're going to be on. That's great. No problem with that. I don't want to do this. I don't want to come into this room and miss church. You say, what do you mean by that? Because if I come into this room and I've got all my other stuff going on and all my other things, and I choose to worship my distractions, I choose to worship my emotions, and that robs me from worshiping Him. Does that make sense? That's my real concern, is that I could blow 2 hours and have worshiped nothing else but myself instead of him. And even in the midst of something like we had last week, that happened in here. There were people in here that, I'm just guessing, I don't know, nobody told me this, I'm just guessing because that's what I do, that there was just people that just kind of got distracted with everything else. And I thought, I spent the first 20 minutes being distracted with everything else. But I had to make a choice. And there's just such a concept sometimes that we're going to come in, and if they play our favorite song, or if so-and-so's teaching, or so-and-so's leading, or I felt good, or I didn't get in a fight with my wife on the way, or my kids aren't little punks that morning, that's the day I'm going to enter in. But the reality is every single day I have to make a decision to worship him. A conscious decision to say, I choose you today. Now, I want to zoom out a little bit from just worship, because there are times, multiple times in history, where God has called his people to new levels of commitment, to making a choice. And I want to show you some of those. Go to Joshua. I'm going to be reading out the Amplified version. It'll be up on your screen. Joshua chapter 24, verse 13. This is when Joshua is older, gone through a bunch of stuff, been into where they're supposed to be. They've done a bunch of things. And we're going to pick it up in the middle of the story. He says, I gave you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build. And you live in them. You eat from vineyards and olive groves you did not plant. Now therefore, fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth. Remove the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. If it is unacceptable in your sight to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you'll serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in the land you live. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. There are times in history where God's looked at his people and he said, make a decision today who you will serve. Let me show you another. 1 Kings 18. This is Elijah. This one's so cool. We know these. These are common scriptures. These are familiar stories. You know these, but just look at them in this way. 1 Kings 18, verse 17. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, Are you he who troubles Israel? Elijah responded, I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, by forsaking the commandments of the Lord and by following the Baals. Therefore, send and gather to me all of Israel at Mount Carmel. I always want to say Mount Caramel. That just seems more appropriate, but I don't. And the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of the god of Asherah, who eat at Queen Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent to all the Israelites and assembled the prophets at Mount Carmel. Elijah came near to all the people and said, How long will you halt and limp? Yours might say, how long will you waver between two opinions? The word breaks down there. How long will you halt and limp between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, then follow him. And the people did not answer him a word. Another one of those moments where God calls his people and said, it's time to choose. It's time to make a decision. Let me show you another one. Go to New Testament. Jesus, stealing out of Chester's Sermon on the Mount. I always feel weird preaching on that. Like I'm stealing. I'm like, it's in the Bible. It's fair game. I can preach on it too if I want, okay? Matthew 6:24, he says, no one can serve two masters. For either he'll hate the one and love the other, or he'll stand by and be devoted to the one and despise and be against the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, deceitful riches, monies, possessions, or whatever is trusted in. Constantly, these moments in history where God is saying to his people, he's saying, you need to choose. You need to make a decision. Here's the point of this today. We are in a season at Cross Life Church where God is saying, you need to choose. Where he's calling us to new levels of commitment. I'm telling you, it's happening on an individual level with us. It's happening, I'm hearing it from people across the board in here that are talking to me, and they're going, man, I just feel like God's saying, hey, it's time to step up in some areas. Why? I don't know. I could guess that he's got some things coming, that we can't live in the place we're at right now, that we can't serve two different things. I don't care, though, why. The why doesn't really matter. The fact is, if God is saying, hey, it's time to step it up, that's really all you need to know. Is he saying, hey, I'm calling you to some new levels and places. I'm calling you to some new things. I'm calling you to make some choices. When I'm thinking about these scriptures and I'm talking to God about this and I'm going, God, it seems a little extreme to stand in front of a bunch of church people who have hearts and desires for God and be like, choose this day, God or Bel. Who's it going to be? Heathens? Right? Yeah, idol worshipers? Like, it seems a little extreme. But anything I choose to worship above God, God has a problem with. Anytime I choose to make a decision to take something else over him, he has an issue with that. And we can lighten it up. And I was thinking about this. This is a little crude of an example, but I think it makes the point. If I decide to cheat on my wife, my lovely wife, never going to happen, not going to happen, praise the Lord. But if I did, and I said, let's just say I hooked up with a Baptist teacher from the First Baptist Church, like a Sunday school teacher from the First Baptist Church. I don't know any of them, so that's probably pretty safe. And she caught me and said, what are you doing? If I were to say, but honey, I didn't hook up with a hooker on the street, what's your problem? I mean, she's a good girl. She teaches Sunday school. The whole concept and idea is that if we begin to look at the things, the decisions that we make, and we say, God, I'm choosing this over you, we can't go, well, I mean, I'm not choosing drugs over you. What's the big deal, God? See, there's people in here this morning that you're literally trying to choose between shooting up drugs into your arm, and there's some of you in here that are trying to decide between, choosing to keep your mouth shut or to gossip. And God looks either way, and he says, I'm a jealous God, and I want you to choose me in both situations. But we can look and go, well, it's just my tongue. It's not near as bad as that druggie. And it's the same thing as going, but I didn't hook up with prostitute. What's your problem? God's calling us to make a decision. He's calling us to say, hey, I'm going to choose you today. I'm going to choose to come after you. I hunger for you in this moment. Is this sermon about our Sunday morning worship? Not particularly, but yes. Is this sermon about sin? Yes. This sermon is about choosing between you and whatever your Bel is. I don't know. I don't know what it is, the decision that you're consistently going, God, I know you want me to do this, but in this situation, I choose something different. Whatever that is, that's your Bel this morning. And God's saying, I need us to make a commitment. I need us to say that today, I choose you. I choose God. If you go back to the scripture in 1 Kings, this kind of blows my mind because I hadn't seen this before. Go back there for me. Mark, are you up there? Yeah, Mark. Go to the, keep going, 19. There you go. 20, go to 20. So Ahab sent to all the Israelites and assembled the prophets at Mount Carmel. And keep going. Yep, keep going. Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you halt and limp between two opinions? First of all, let's stop there. Title of my message today is Living with a Limp. Isn't that amazing, that concept, when he says, when we waver between two opinions, we're limping. You can't stand in stability when you're between two things. The scripture says, and James says, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He's limping through. You can't have any stability. When I work out, it's big, like when you're working out, to have stability, right? But if you have a limp, I have a metal rod in my leg. I used to be in the Hells Angels and had a motorcycle wreck. Some of that's true, half that's true. I'll let you decide which. Got a metal rod in my leg from here to here. Okay? And it's crazy. Like, I feel like my father, because he had metal parts, and when the weather would change, he'd complain about his parts hurting. Yeah, I feel old because I do the same thing. Like, with this weather, my leg is like fired up, right? I'm so young to be this old, right? When I do lifting, when I lift, I know it doesn't look like I lift. I lift things, okay? When I lift and weight lift and stuff, this leg always gives out first. This leg will bend in. When you walk, when you're between two decisions, when you're unwilling to commit to something, you'll have a limp. And you'll be unstable and unable to do what God called you to do. And look at this. He says, if the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. Look at this line right here. And the people did not answer him a word. See, there's three decisions when God calls us to commitment. The first one is, yes, I choose God. The second one is, no, I choose Baal. The third is, I keep my options open. And let me tell you, that's the scariest one of them all. God said, I'd rather you be hot or cold, but since you're limping through life, since you're lukewarm, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth. The worst thing is when we think, I'm just going to wait and see where this thing goes. I don't want to commit fully to this thing because I don't know how it's going to turn out. This could mean a variety of things. This could be a relationship. Some of you need to put a ring on it. Quote Beyonce. To commit to some relationships. Some of us in here need to stop waiting to see if that guy's going to work out or not and go ahead and commit. There's something about living in a place where we're unwilling to choose, where we're unwilling to make a decision, where we're unwilling to say, God, I'm all in on this thing. I'm all in with whatever you're calling me to. I'm all in. I don't want to do the maybe today or maybe tomorrow. I don't want to do the, I'll try it out and see how it works. A few months ago, I was kind of struggling with this concept. And I was really trying to make some decisions about what I needed to do and what I wanted to do. And I knew what the right decision was, but there was this kind of wavering between, kind of looking at other options, kind of seeing what else I wanted to do. And I talked to Chester about it and discussed it and dealt with some things and that type of stuff. But it happened. He got to tell his story about David Hogan the other day, and it was phenomenal. What happened to me at that service was he had this idea, and Jim Parrish summed it up for me because we were talking about it. He said, our standards are too low is what he learned. That's what he told me when he's listening to that. He goes, our standards are too low. And there was something that he preached that I thought was one of the most phenomenal things is he called the people to be faithful. And I thought, God, I have been dealing with some double-mindedness where I'm keeping my options open, where I'm trying to see if I really want to do this or not. And once again, God pretty much just spanks me all the time, and he might be gentle with you, but he said to me, he says, Matt, you've been double-minded in this area in your life. He said, it's time to make a choice. It's time to choose which direction you're going. And I said, I choose you. And everything changed from that moment. No longer was the pulling. No longer was the unwaveringness, because you can't operate from a place of wavering. You're ineffective to do anything in the kingdom of God if you're always going back and forth. But once that changed, there were some phenomenal things that happened with me. And one of those things was just once I said yes, vision came back into my heart. It was just oh, that's what you're going to do. I hadn't seen that before. Once he said yes, there was an excitement to what he was going to do. There was a passion that rose back up. Because when I'm unstable, there's no passion. When you're unstable, there's no vision. When you're unstable, there's just fear. When you're unstable, there's just doubt and concern and anxiety. But if we make that decision to say, hey, I'm going after you, suddenly the Bible says he holds us up with his right hand. And I know without a doubt what he says to do, and you move forward into that. Cross Life Church, God's calling us to make a commitment. God's calling us to step up. Say, what area? I don't know. It's different for each of us. But he's calling us to step up in some areas. He's calling us to say, hey, I'm going to make a decision. I want to show you one more time where God called them to a choice. Luke chapter 9, verse 23 says, and he said to them all, this is Jesus speaking, if any person wills to come after me, let him deny himself, disown himself, forget, lose sight of himself and his own interest, refuse and give up himself, and take up his cross daily and follow me. Cleave steadfastly to me, conform wholly to my example in living and in need be if dying also. This is the exact same line, is choose this day whom you will serve. Somebody made fun of me the other day, my Assembly of God background, because we get saved a lot in the Assembly of Gods, like every Sunday. Saturdays were rough, apparently, that church, but and they were kind of making fun of me. But here's the reality of it. When somebody comes up here and they give their life to God for the first time, this is what I have them pray. I have them say, God, I know I'm a sinner. Forgive me of my sins. Be the boss of my life. I wish that prayer would be our prayer every day. Today, God, be the boss of my life. Because he said, take up your cross today. Daily, take up your cross. It's the same call. You should literally, your feet should not hit the ground before you go. Today, I choose to worship you. You should not get 3 bars into the first song on a Sunday morning before you go, today, I choose to worship you. The question I asked about last week that I really got an answer is I said, God, was last week because of you or because of us? Like, who initiated that? Was that because you just were like, I'm going to show up and blow up? It's just a great day to show up at Cross Life Church. Or was it because there was such a group of people that said, we're going after God today? There was a group of people that said, today I choose to worship you. And he's like, oh, look what's happening at Cross Life. Let's go check that out. I don't know. But what I do know is I'm going to deal with a thing I can do, and that's going to be me choosing. That's going to be me coming with expectation. That's going to be me saying, God, today I'm choose you. Today I make you my decision.